So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. TIANS, in partnership with Tourism Nova Scotia, is pleased to offer a series of Tech Tuesday webinars focused on AI and cybersecurity. Today's session is on surviving the outage. I would like to thank Tourism Nova Scotia. Their support enables us to offer these opportunities to you at no cost. My name is Lynn McDonough Hughes with TIANS, and I'm pleased to introduce this afternoon's session. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. These lands are governed by the treaties of peace and friendship first signed in 1726. We would also like to recognize and honor the more than 400-year legacy of the African descent in Nova Scotia and offer gratitude to the ancestors who came before us. Joining us today is Thomas Rizzuto. Thomas is a cybersecurity specialist with Online Computer Services, a long-standing Nova Scotia-based IT provider serving the tourism, hospitality, and small business sectors for over 36 years. Thanks very much, Thomas. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Lynn. I hope everyone can hear and see me okay. Lynn, the presentation's coming through all right? All right, perfect. So as Lynn said, my name's Thomas. I'm from Online Computer Services. We deal primarily here in Halifax, but we also work with businesses all over Nova Scotia and outside of Nova Scotia as well. A lot of our customers do fall within the tourism industry, the hospitality industry. So we're well versed in how your businesses operate and what your needs are. And what I want to talk about today is surviving the outage. That can mean a few things, but in this context, I'm going to be talking about outage of IT specifically. So we'll talk about the impact that can have for you, identifying your weaknesses, how you can plan and be more prepared. This will be IT-centric, but a lot of the topics discussed here are more broadly applicable as well. If you find that there are other areas in your business that you aren't prepared for, or you could see improvement, you might be able to take this information and push it further to improve there. This is interactive, so if at any point you have any questions or you have statements or anything to contribute, please do. Just hop right in, unmute yourself, and join in. Quick disclaimer. This is not a definitive guide on how to do this, on disaster preparedness or outage preparedness. I'm not giving you step-by-step instructions. This is just learned experience, industry standards, and ultimately the goal here, for me at least, would be for you to think of things that you haven't thought of before. Think of scenarios that you haven't encountered before and be a little bit better prepared. If you leave this presentation feeling overwhelmed or underprepared, reach out to your IT team or whoever you have in that regard. The IT is usually pulled into all sorts of aspects of your business, whether it's IT or not. I often get asked if I can fix an electrical outlet, but just consider IT in all facets of your business. So, high stakes for tourism. Tourism is very seasonal. It's highly seasonal. You have your high seasons and your low seasons. So if you have an outage during your high season, you have even more to lose. You lose reputation with your customers. You lose the monetary value of that opportunity with your customers. So if you take just a little bit of time ahead of time to prepare for these situations, that can put yourself in a much better position if these situations were to occur. It's not guaranteed that it ever will, but I promise you that being prepared ahead of time is much better than panicking during the incident and trying to self-manage your response at that time. Preparedness is key. For example, let's say you're a tour operator and a cruise ship comes in and guests aren't able to check in with you, or you aren't able to find the reservation because of an internet outage. If they can go down the street to your competitor and then get the same service from them because they have plans in place or they have redundancy, not only is that a reputational hit because they might review you poorly, that's just a loss of monetary value of funds for you. Um, so let's discuss outages and disasters and how they differ. This is kind of in the IT context. Uh, so outages particularly are a disruption to a service that you subscribe to or you make benefit of. And these are usually solved by the service provider themselves. These can be partial or full outage. When people think of outage, they just assume that everything's broken, nothing's working. But sometimes it can be partial. It could be that some things within this service aren't working, others are. So whoever's responsible for giving you this service, let's say it was a web service, a software as a service, a SaaS, the company that produces that would usually be made aware of that problem and they would resolve it. So there's nothing on you to do in that regard. Uh, some outages from the last year alone. The more we rely on technology, the more we find that it can be quite unreliable. In the last year, we've seen all of these services, and some of these you might not even be familiar with. Amazon is obviously the shopping platform, but many people aren't aware that they also have something called AWS, which is they basically sell computing power to companies. So a lot of software services, platforms, and a majority of the internet is actually powered by them. So when there was an outage in 2025, you noticed that many sites services were simultaneously unavailable. So that's kind of the problem with dependence on one major provider. So one thing to consider in this regard is diversifying your portfolio of tools, of subscriptions, of services. It can be very convenient to keep it all under one umbrella, under one company. But you have to consider the implications that that has when that service isn't available. Another one that you might hear frequently is Cloudflare. They're kind of the backbone of the internet. A few times over the past year, there have been big outages, and you can't get to websites, you can't download files. There's all sorts of problems. Other services here, Eastlink, Bell Alliant, those are local to the Atlantic region. We frequently deal with outages with them, and when you don't have internet, I think we all know the pain. Disasters, unlike outages, disasters, you are typically responsible for the recovery, meaning nobody's going to handle it for you. If your internet goes down, the outage would be that Bell Alliant will fix that for you. In a disaster, if your office collapses or is on fire, nobody's coming to save the day. Your insurance might pay out, but you are still responsible for the recovery plan. So a disaster is typically much more complex, heavily involved, and requires a lot more planning to recover from successfully. So I'm going to go through some common outages. These may seem very simple, basic, but the idea is just that have you considered the impact that these will have for your business? Have you taken the time to think through how you will escape from these outages? This is the most common one we deal with across all of our customers, and we just hear about in general is the internet. We've come to develop an extreme reliance on the internet, and whether you know it or not, you are likely using it in many more areas than you believe. One example would be on my desk here, I have a telephone, but in actuality, it operates over the internet. So if I don't have internet, I need to realize that I don't have 911 service. So these are all just aspects to consider. The internet being the primary one because it is kind of the gateway out into the digital world. If you can't get on the internet, you can't get further downstream to your booking software, to your reservation software. You can't take payments. These are all things to consider. Cloud. I know cloud can be a confusing word. It's kind of a catch-all term for everything nowadays. Everyone wants to be in the cloud with AI. Not everyone understands that they are likely using cloud in one way or another. You are very likely indirectly using the cloud in many situations. And by that, I mean you are subscribed to a piece of software, to a website, to some service that is using a public cloud, meaning Amazon, Google, Microsoft. So, like I said earlier, when these big players have an outage or there's an interruption, uh, that can really affect more platforms than you would realize. Um, in my role, I use the cloud directly, and I could tell you exactly what I use the cloud for. There's all sorts of services, but I also I subscribe to many services. I'm trying to think of some that could be applicable to you, but um, OpenTable might be one that you use if you're a restaurant. Um, Underneath OpenTable uses public cloud. So just be aware and take into consideration that just because there's a brand name on a product, it doesn't mean that they are fully in charge of the product that they deliver to you. They may be reliant on other distributors, other vendors. Another very common one would be uh, email. Um, and unfortunately, very few people take into consideration the extent that email is tied into their business. Um, People don't realize that files they rely on daily are in an attachment in an email. Someone might come and say, "Can you please provide me with this file?" And you'll come to realize that it's not stored anywhere other than in your inbox, which is a horrible idea. Please don't do that, but it happens. Contact info. Some people store all of their contact info, the only copy in Outlook, in their Outlook contacts, access codes. The list goes on. Email is a fantastic tool, but it's very limited in what you should be storing in there. It should be for communication, really. You should find other ways of storing information that isn't email. So communications beside email. Um, in 2025, we didn't have any major disruptions in the Atlantic region with cell phone. I believe it was in 24 or 23 that there was a just a huge outage, widespread across all of Nova Scotia, really, and most cell phones weren't able to dial out, and you weren't able to reach 911. Um, think about a situation in which you needed to reach 911 for your staff, for their safety, or for your customers. Um, what's the alternative? What's the backup plan? Do you have a landline somewhere? Have you considered that you can send text messages to 911? These are all things to consider just in the emergency scenario. Online chat, a lot of people these days are using Slack or Microsoft Teams for communication. When that goes down, what does your business lose? What operational value do you lose? Can you operate? Are you ready to move to a different communication channel? And if you do, how quickly can you do that? This is another very common one, but very few people consider when it comes to IT is power. Without power, we can't make IT work. So, um, are you completely reliant on power? Some tour operators may be based in their vehicles, so power may not be as huge a concern. But if you do have office operations and the power goes out, can you still check guests in? Can you serve your guests? Can you respond to them? Do you have a backup plan? Do you have a laptop that has a battery? How long can that last? There's all sorts of things to consider on just the very basic commodity that is power. Not to mention with that, luckily with the NS Power incident, there wasn't any major disruption to the distribution of the utility, like the power itself. But had there been, um, could you have sustained your operations for a long period? We're only now seeing the restoral of Nova Scotia Power's IT infrastructure, their meter billing, all of the services they provide. So if we had been without power, obviously there would have been much bigger issues, but could you sustain an outage? How long? Just things to consider. Just curious if anyone here has any experiences with outages, if anyone has had to deal with one, or what that scenario looked like for you. Was it a complete mess? Did you pull your hair out? Were you prepared? Did you have a plan? If anyone has anything to contribute?
I say we've definitely had a variety over the years. Usually internet's a big one.
Yeah.
We're very lucky these days. Power is not because we have a
Okay.
big generator, makes life a lot easier.
Good. Good.
But internet is huge.
Yeah. And when it goes out, is it a complete scramble? Do you have a plan?
It depends on who's on site. Some people are
Okay.
better at fixing things than not. A lot of our like debit machines, things like that, you can run off a hotspot if that's available.
Right.
The problem we run into is our cell service is atrocious. So
Okay.
sometimes you have to set up camp in some weird corner and get guests to come to you to finish
Yep.
payment. But there's definitely some workarounds that we have in place.
Okay. And are your staff aware of those workarounds? Are they documented? Or do you have a procedure, or is it just whoever happens to be on staff is kind of
It's
captaining?
a mix.
Yeah. Okay.
There
All
are
right.
some procedures, but not everyone is as tech savvy as others. So it goes better than others sometimes, I guess.
Fair, fair enough. Yep. And it happens. Even if you have the perfect procedure in place, it always depends on who's following it. So, um, anyone else have anything to contribute? Any outages that have been noteworthy or painful? Nope, no worries. Okay. So common disasters. We'll go through a few. They're pretty obvious, self-explanatory. These are far more kind of detrimental, but it's still worth taking the time to go through and consider the outcomes and how you are best prepared. Natural disasters, flood, hurricane, earthquakes. Um, we are on the coast, so I know that not everyone is necessarily directly on the coast, but there's some implications, and we are more susceptible to hurricane season. Um, if a big hurricane comes through, are your operations devastated? Do you have a backup plan? Um, Flood, it's hard to say based on, the cross section of businesses we have. Um, would a flood take out your office? Would you be able to continue operations, or are you completely dead? And if a flood were to take out just a road, are you a tour operator? Do you have a backup route planned? There's just so many different facets to this. So, uh, another one being building fire. We actually had the experience, this was a long time ago, of a local business who had a complete loss. It was a fully involved building fire. Everything was lost. And fortunately enough, they were able to recover their business operations pretty rapidly. And I say rapidly, within a few days, because they had a procedure in place for what would happen. They knew what to do next. They knew what the next step was, and they knew who to involve. That's one thing that many people struggle with is who to involve. It's usually run it up the ladder and take it to the top right away and get their input. But usually there is a more strategic way to deal with these disasters. Um, if it's a specific IT disaster, there's no point in taking it directly to a manager who's then going to delegate it elsewhere. Make sure that your team is empowered and ready to get the right people involved at the right time. The next one, we dealt with this recently, public health. So the pandemic, that obviously changed everything and how everything works and how we know our daily lives to operate. But if it were to happen again, are you ready for that? Have you considered that it might, it could? To me personally, it seems like a once in a lifetime event, but there's a good chance that it may not be. Have you taken the time to look at how your operations would shift? Do you think you could keep your staff on? Would you have to be ready to lay them off? Um, there's just all sorts of considerations. If you're in the food industry, what if the supply chain for a meat vendor or a specific type of food was compromised, and you're a primarily meat-based business. These are all just examples, but um, do you have alternatives ready? Do you have another vendor lined up? How could you pivot? So these aren't necessarily IT factors. These are just general business factors, but this also applies to the IT side. Um, Supply chain for IT. I'm not sure if anyone has tried to purchase a computer recently, but the prices have gone sky high, um, just primarily due to AI. But uh, if you need a computer right now, do you have the capital outlay for it? Or should you have a spare laptop ready to go in case yours dies? Loss of key personnel. This one is one that very few people actually take the time to consider fully. Um, if you have a few key people in your organization, if one or all of them were to be lost, could your business sustain itself, or could your staff fill their roles to keep operations going? One thing that we talk about often is the bus factor, meaning if your key person were to be struck by a bus, and besides their unfortunate demise, how do you continue? Is their position, are their roles, are their responsibilities documented? Are they in paper somewhere or digital? Um, if someone stepped into their shoes to fill that role, how quickly could they pick up the pieces and continue? On that, we also talk about information silos. Um, some people um, aren't the best at disseminating information. They're very good at retaining it, and they themselves are a very knowledgeable person, but that knowledge isn't shared anywhere to the whole company, to your team members, to your coworkers. So if that person were to suddenly leave or take sick, where is that information? It shouldn't just be in someone's head. It should be tangible, physical, digital, somewhere that's accessible. Anyone have any experiences with disasters? Anything super, super awful or moderate or weather related or anything that they want to share? And if not, that's okay. We'll keep going. All right. So pivoting a bit towards the IT side of this, um, what I, as an IT specialist, care about is your data, how your data is accessed, how we restore your operations when your operations are interrupted, and how fast we can do that. So, your data, the most important thing for you to understand and to define is what is your data? I ask many business owners, what's your business data? What is it composed of? And I get, oh, it's a couple Excel sheets here, it's a couple Word documents there. And then as time goes on, they go, oh, but we also use this cloud software and we have a Dropbox set up, but we also have a Google Drive. So it's really important that if your information is sprawling, you define where it is and how it can be accessed. If your data isn't backed up, to me as an IT person, it doesn't exist. You need to have your data in multiple places or have it in a redundant fashion. Uh, if it's just on your laptop and your laptop takes a swim tomorrow, you could send it away for data recovery, but can your business sustain those 2 weeks while it's gone, only for you to find out that it can't be recovered? So there's lots of different options for backup. And we use the 3-2-1 rule. This is kind of an industry standard where there should be 3 copies of your data, the original data itself, and then 2 backups. Two being 2 different kinds of backup. So if you have one on a USB drive, you also should have one stored on a server somewhere. So it's 2 different kinds of physical media. I would say CDs, but those are obsolete at this point. So Some people store it in the cloud and then also on a local storage device, but you just want to make sure that you have two separate copies. This comes back to the scenario, to a disaster scenario where you lose your office. If your only backup was at your office, it's no good to you. You need to have that second copy off-site. So the 321, the one here is that you need one copy kept off-site. If you're backing up, but you're keeping it on site, you are not backing up. Many people say, well, my data is in a cloud service. It's in a software service. I use a booking service that's in the cloud, so it's safe there. It's backed up. You have no guarantee of that. Many people just assume that because you're paying them, that your data is safe, it will always be available, and that's not the case. If you read through the terms of service of a lot of these services, they make no claim that your data is backed up, that it's safe, that it's ready, that it's available. So it's important, if you really want to be sustainable long-term and ready for disaster, that you reach out to these vendors individually and ask them, how am I covered? Am I ready? Where's my data? Is it readily accessible outside of your software? Like, is there a button where I could say, pull down all of my data? In that regard, how do you handle your data if there was an outage? By that, I mean, let's say the internet died right now. Is your data only stored in the cloud so that you couldn't continue operations without the cloud? If I were a tour operator and all my reservations were on a cloud service, and I had a line of 24 people ready to give me their hard-earned money, could I continue operations? Do I have a paper copy of these reservations ready to go? Some people every day at the top of the morning will print out the reservations, even if they operate digitally, they keep using their iPad, their software. They have that paper copy ready to pull out. It's in their back pocket if things go sideways. So I want to emphasize that if you have these software platforms, reach out to them, ask them if your data is your data, where it is, if it's available, how it's backed up, where it's backed up to. Your data needs to be accessible in an emergency or an outage or a disaster. Most people just say, yes, I'm backing up my data. That's great. And you could even have your data physically on a drive in front of you, but that doesn't give you access to it. You might need some other component. If you use industry-specific software, you might have the underlying data, but do you have the software itself that can access this data? Kind of an analogy here would be, let's say someone gave you the recommendation that you keep $10,000 in an emergency fund. And you say, yes, that's a great idea. And you put those funds in the bank. And an emergency arises and you go, okay, I need those funds. And you go and the ATM is out of service. You have the funds, it's great. So you have your data, it's great, but you don't have the tools to get that data. So you need to be prepared, not just with your data, but with tools to make your data useful to you. So how do we proceed? What can we do from here going forward? All the scenarios that involve technology in your business, it's important that you think through not only the situations or the daily operations of how you use it, but how your operations would change without it. Unplanned, planned. Let's say you need to swap it out for a different piece of software, things like that. How do your operations flow outside the scope of the software? We often don't want to build IT operations and processes around specific tools. We want to build the processes themselves and then let these tools help us. Winging it during an outage is not a response plan. Just saying, we'll figure it out. It's not that big of a deal. I can't tell you how stressful that is, how demoralizing it is for staff to just be thrown into it and say, figure it out. And it can be confidence inspiring when you have a plan, a step-by-step action ready to go, and it can be a really powerful tool to keep your business functioning and to also outperform your competitors. If you can, grab business from someone that just couldn't cut the bill when an outage happened, that's a good look. So some quick common considerations. Where are your response plans actually stored? We did an audit of a company a while back, and they were actually surprisingly well planned. They were thoughtful. They had all these plans. They were stored on their shared server, and they were very proud of that. They had all these documents, and I hypothetically went over to their server and pulled the plug and said, "All right, show me your response plans." And they threw their hands up in the air. Your response plans are only as good as they are accessible. So make sure that they are not just stored digitally, that there's paper copies available, that there's offline copies, and don't be the only person that knows about these. Make sure that your team knows how to pull these out of the filing cabinet and use them. With that said, test your plans. An untested plan is not a plan. So run mock scenarios and do it consistently. Make an appointment in your calendar. I recommend at the start of the high season and at the end. Doing it at the start, you get to see if there have been any changes over the winter that might affect if you were to use this plan during the high season, you'll see the changes that were made. And at the end of the season, again, if there have been significant changes or shifts in how things operate, or one tool has been pulled out and changed for another, that just gives you the insight into how these plans would actually function when they're needed. So this is a modified version of a risk assessment. You don't have to take this as a strict form. It's just kind of a general guideline in how we like to help people identify the risks they have, how IT might affect their operations, their company, their outlook on the future. So in the left-hand column, the risk, that's the actual the risk itself, meaning the point of technology that you're trying to better understand. Description, describe what happens when you encounter the worst case scenario with this risk. So the internet outage, it's a full outage. And in this case, it disables the POS terminals, the payment terminals, and your booking staff can't operate. Given that, what is the overall risk? So the probability and the severity. We'll get into that into a second, but how critical is this to your operations? A mitigation, if there's a direct opportunity for a mitigation, this is the perfect time to identify that. So in this case, we installed a backup internet provider. It's a quick, easy solution. It's not a guaranteed resolution of this problem. You could still have someone crash into the telephone pole directly outside your business, and you lose both of these solutions. You lose your primary and your mitigation. But this gets you going in the right direction in case of a failure. Response plan. For this risk, you list your response plan. A response plan doesn't have to be some complicated, very high detailed document. It just needs to be step-driven. So step 1, 2, 3, so that whoever picks it up can follow it and get the business back to a state where you are operating from a known state, from a good place. So list the response plan number or the title of the document and just where it's stored. In this case, we said filing cabinet number 2 in the accounting office or the shared network drive. Just make it very apparent to anyone that's going to need it. Spoke of probability severity. This is kind of a matrix that helps you identify the overall risk. So we're looking at consequence on the top versus likelihood. Um, so for consequence, there is insignificant, minor, moderate, major, critical. And then you pair that with the likelihood of it actually happening. Um, when you put those together, you get a greater idea of how important that risk or that service or that possibility of a disaster or an outage is to your business. You can see low in the top left, and then extreme in the bottom right. So you should be focusing most of your effort to the extreme bottom right, meaning that those risks should be identified and should be reviewed more regularly, more thoroughly. The lower risks, not as important to deal with, but you should at some point at least identify them and come up with a mitigation plan. So the outages, disasters that we talked about earlier, these are just some quick mitigations, just some ideas that might spark a thought for you. So internet outage, everyone probably deals with this. One alternative would be get another internet service into your location. Don't just go get another internet service from the same provider. Get one from a different provider. So I know not everyone is fortunate enough to have both providers available to them. I at home only have Eastlink, but Eastlink, Bell, just be aware that some internet providers do use the underlying infrastructure of other companies. As an example, Citywide and Purple Cow use Eastlink. So in a lot of mission critical scenarios, we suggest putting in Eastlink and Bell. But one alternative that many other people don't consider is Starlink. Starlink is satellite-based internet, and you can install it and have it sit there idle. You don't necessarily need to pay for it, but you can activate it on demand. So let's say your internet goes out and your payment terminals aren't working. You could switch on your Starlink relatively easily and then have that take over for your internet. It may not be the best long-term solution for video conferencing or things like that, but at least it gets you going and there's minimal disruption to your daily operations. Cloud, again, you may not think you're using cloud, but there's a good chance you are. There's a good chance that the software that you're using is super reliant on cloud. So one mitigation for this would be to go to your vendor and ask them, are you multi-cloud or do you host your product in multiple clouds? Is there redundancy? If Amazon goes down, am I completely screwed or do you automatically fall over to someone that is still operational? Payment systems. Earlier, we talked about having to put a hotspot on and use your credit card terminals off a hotspot, and then you're up in the corner of the room trying to get coverage. So one thing to consider would be some payment terminals can have cellular built in. Like you said, Kyla, not everywhere has great coverage, so you can get ones that have extended boosters on them. There's all sorts of options, but you don't want to provide a service, render a service to a customer, and then not be able to get paid for that. So everyone with Wi-Fi payment terminals often don't realize that you can do offline credit card payments, and then you just have to capture them within 24 hours. Very dependent on your credit card processor, but it is an option. You do have to know how to enable it, but that's one option. And then, as mentioned here, cellular, you can get just a singular cellular enabled payment terminal, and that lets you, when the Wi-Fi goes down, lets you to at least take payments in a minimal capacity, but still. Email. Everyone's always expecting email to work. It's a very reliable service, but when it goes down, it can cause a lot of havoc. People don't realize how dependent they are on notifications from email, on communications to their customers directly. Some people use email for very time-sensitive subjects. So if you don't get an email within a minute, let's say emails are delayed for 5 minutes, what's the alternative? Email is a hard thing to have redundancy with. We all have just our email addresses with our our company names. So it's just important that you have a designated registered plan ready to go when that does fail. What's the alternative? Can you use text message instead? Can you use a phone call directly? Do you have phone numbers for the people that need to be reached? Um, on the flip side of that, if the phones and text messages go down, are you falling back over to email? If so, do you have email addresses for the important people? Uh, Power. Uh, this may not be applicable to everyone, but battery backups. If you have a physical computer that you need running, um, you need high uptime, you need it to be available. If the power flickers, your PC will typically turn off because the power was gone for a second, and then you have to wait for it to boot up and go through the whole process again. One thing we do is we put battery backups in. It keeps it so that if there's a quick temporary power outage, your computer will stay running for a few minutes, and then when the power restores, it's like nothing ever happened. It won't give you a lot of runtime, but it's enough to get you through a very short outage, or if the outage is going to be extended, you can save everything on that computer to a thumb drive or somewhere safe that you can continue to access all of your documents. Um, a generator is also an option. It may not be within the budget. It really depends on your circumstances, but just one thing to consider. And one more thing is not IT related, but flashlights. If the power goes out, do you have flashlights around? Are you ready for the dark? And this is more disaster focused, but um, flood, fire, weather, total loss of premise, your office is gone, your business location is gone. Um, some businesses are completely centric to their location, so this may not be applicable, but um, are you able to pick up your operations and continue them from home? Uh, could you weather the operations out of a friend's business for a few months while you relocate? Do you have plans for that? Do you have a spare computer? If your office burned down, do you take a laptop home with you that you could continue to use to keep working? Um, Typically, in these complete loss scenarios of office buildings, of businesses, a lot of IT equipment is not recoverable. Just the heat alone, even if the device looks okay, the device just won't turn on. So do you have a redundancy, a backup, a plan for that? And like we discussed earlier, data backups, copies of your data that's not at your office. Make sure it's available. And if you do have all these disaster plans, um, make sure that they're not solely stored at your office. You don't want to have to dig through rubble of a burned down office or a flooded office just to find these plans that are probably gone anyway. Make sure they are available and ready to you outside of your primary business location, if that is applicable to you. I'm just curious if anyone has any questions or thoughts. We're nearing the end here. Any questions, comments? And failing that, I'm just curious if anyone has any current plans um, or preparedness or readiness for anything that we've discussed here.
I'm just wondering about the case link that you shared. So I could have a modem, and every time that I need it, I could like upgrade it or pay for the month, or because
Yeah,
sometimes we are in meetings, and depending on the country that we are training,
right.
is it depends on like on the weather, right? Sometimes.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, a lot of internet services, as long as you don't have a contract, you could turn your modem on and off as necessary. Um, the primary situation where we do that would be with Starlink.
Yeah.
We just keep it turned off throughout the year, and whenever we need it, we flick it on. We already have the modem, the hardware, everything ready. Um, I would say contact the company that you plan on doing this with first. Not everyone is very flexible in those engagements. Some people want you on that year-long contract. Some people are much more flexible and willing to do monthly or as needed service. So,
Okay, please. Thank you.
yeah. And I'm just curious if anyone could think of any risk, disaster, or outage that maybe I haven't discussed here and might be good for everyone else in the audience to think about or consider, or something that your business has encountered. This was by no means a comprehensive list, but I hope that it gets you going in the right direction of what to think about and how to plan for the future.
It was a good list, Thomas. I'm not sure
Thank
if
you.
anybody has anything to add to it.
Nothing that I can think of. It's definitely
No,
helpful in thinking about plans we should have in place and kind of different ways to share those too. Because yeah, you don't even think about it. Everything's just in the cloud, and I'm like, yeah, it lives there. It's good.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Just small things to consider, but they're definitely helpful in the right situation. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, if anyone has any questions, I'll be here for a few minutes. Otherwise, thank you for your time, and I hope this was at least a little bit helpful.
Yes, thank you.
It
Thank
definitely
you very
was,
much.
Thomas. Yeah. It's always good for us, even internally, to double check and make sure that we've done everything that we can, because I know we've had a few scares, as you know, Thomas.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and certainly thanks very much for contributing to the discussion. Our next session is on the 17th of March, and that will be on AI as we alternate our topics. So that one will be on AI and beyond the hype. And this session, of course, has been recorded and it will be up on TIANS YouTube later this afternoon. So if you want to refer back to all the good stuff that Thomas reviewed, it will be available for you. And as always, please reach out if you have any questions. We're always here to answer and happy to do so. And thank you again to Tourism Nova Scotia. I know Jennifer is on today, and we very much appreciate the support that we've received from them to be able to provide this series to you this year. So thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.